Back in 1966, karting was still in its infancy and was about to expand into multiple territories, and so the FIA karting paddock journeyed to Copenhagen for the World Championship. It was won by Susanna Ranganelli, who remains the only woman ever to win a four-wheeled international world motorsport title governed by the FIA. In junior, the battle has been fantastic so far. After Thibaut Ramaker's dominated in Valencia, Oleksandr Bondarev spent a tough race defending from Lewis Werrell to win his first FIA karting final in Trinec. But the title battle is far from over, and as early as the celebrations begin, so too does the work to learn another new circuit. Here in Denmark, things are even more competitive than ever, with multiple drivers taking heat wins and no one driver being dominant. The quest for victory has been between Kart Republic and Paralin for most of the weekend, with Jacopo Martinez and Christian Castoya starting from the front row of the grid. The two previous winners of finals, Ramekers and Bondarev, will now go head-to-head on the second row of the grid, with Belgium's Dries van Langendonk and the brilliant Tiziano Monza of Singapore behind them. The top four would remain as they started as the field swept through turn one. But championship contender Lewis Werrell and fellow Brit Noah Wolff were squeezed off the road and plummeted to the back of the queue. Into turn three, Nicholas Schaufler almost lost the kart, and as he recovered, Oliver Kinmark was left with nowhere to go. He rejoined, but after a promising weekend, all his hard work was now effectively undone. Martinez had a huge advantage up front, and Ramekers was struggling, now losing out to Schaufler. But it wasn't long before Bondarev was making his bid for second, and passed Castoya's Paralin, with the Shamik Europe kart of Tiziano Monza now up to an impressive fourth and hunting them down. It was clear that Schaufler's problems were with the kart and not the driver, and as he dropped down the order, he would eventually coast into the pits to retire. Zach Drummond and Stepan Antonov were now challenging, as they made their moves on Monza. But Martinez was proving to be quite a hard man to catch out in the lead. In the midfield, there was a terrific scrap between the Tony karts of Kirill Ditiev and Scott Lindblom and the Paralins of Vivek Kanthan and Jack Iliff. By the end of lap 7, Bondarev had caught his teammate, and before the Italian even knew what to do next, Bondarev was already taking the lead. With Ukrainian now up front and his main rivals hitting trouble, it must have looked too good to be true. Sadly, Mies Huben and Alfie Slater's day ended at the final corner, particularly frustrating for Huben, who tried and couldn't quite manage to rejoin. Paralin weren't giving up, as Castoya swept past Martinez for second and Drummond joined him up to third. But instead of working with his teammate to catch the Ukrainian in the lead, he decided to make the move to pass the Spaniard. They banged wheels and lost time, with Antonov through into fourth ahead of Castoya. To make matters worse, Ramekers and Monza were now ready to pounce, having caught them all with vigour. It wasn't long before Martinez retaliated, and Drummond paid the price, dropping all the way down to 7th. But there were more battles to come. Dries van Langendonk and Tame Soleil would soon join the fracas of an 8-kart melee that rumbled on for lap after lap, at the gradual expense of Ramekers, who would have more problems and would eventually fall even further back. There were great conflicts further up the order, as Scott Lindblom went rogue on Tony Kart teammate Kirill Ditiev. But there was more woe on the horizon for Kinmark, who had driven brilliantly for Koski Motorsport. His weekend ended in disappointment at 2/3 distance. Just when Kart Republic were preparing for an easy finish, Antonov decided to make the move for second and passed his Italian stablemate. But after a tough weekend where he had barely won a race all weekend, Oleksandr Bondarev had saved his best drive for the final, and for the second event in a row, he clinched the victory, this time by a decent margin over his Kart Republic teammates. The Paralins were close behind, but couldn't quite match Dino Chiesa's squad. With Bondarev victorious and his rivals floundering, it might be easier to win the title next month than originally expected. Behind the Kart Republic podium came a trio of Paralins, the patient Castoya, the exceptional Monza, and the valiant Drummond. Van Langendonk claimed 7th ahead of Lindblom, whilst Iliff made a heroic surge to the top 10, as did Andy Consani. Nobody could have predicted the Kart Republic trio clean sweeping the trophies from Denmark, but as Jacopo Martinez and Stepan Antonov enjoyed their first visits to the rostrum this year, Bondarev probably couldn't help but start thinking about the possibility of becoming champion, now 42 points clear at the top of the ranks. But for now, it's time to get busy with a fizzy.
Yeah, the race was quite hard. Starting from the weekend, we managed P2 in qualifying, which was good. And then just moved slowly through the heats and then started P4 in the final. Then on the first laps, I was around P2, P3. Then I managed to get into P2 with a clear gap. Then I managed to catch Jacopo. And then I think behind they started to fight a bit, which made me pull away to a gap which I would just need to control the pace to get the win. For sure in Cremona we will try to do our best. I don't want to say anything in the championship because you can get 80 points per weekend and have a 42-point advantage, so anything is still possible. But we will work very hard with the whole team to be as strong as we were the whole season in Cremona.
In theory, all Oleksandr Bondarev has to do in Cremona is stay in the top 5, and he will become Ukraine's first ever European champion, the ultimate comeback story in the sport's history.